everyone, welcome back to the Wimpy Studio. Today, I'm going to be discussing a book and a movie. They're both the same name, both the same thing, pretty much. It's The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This is written by Rebecca Skloot, I don't know. And I wanted to, talk about the book and then talk about the movie and just my thoughts on it, because I thought this was a very powerful story. So, okay. So we had to read this for English class. And I think, when everyone was handed the book, they, sighed at how thick it was. And my friend Casey, her book ripped. I know that's not really important, but still. But basically, yeah, I think everyone was, not really knowing what they were getting themselves into. We did not know much about this book, except that our teacher was hyping it up, saying it was, her favorite book ever. So, we had that. So here's just a little summary. There's a little summary on the front and then a little summary on the back. So it says, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Doctors took her cells without asking. Those cells never died. They launched a medical revolution and a multi-million-dollar industry. More than 20 years later, her children found out. Their lives would never be the same. Sounds kind of ominous, am I right? Okay. Here's a little summary on the back. Her name was Henrietta Lacks, but scientists know her as Gila. She was a poor black tobacco farmer whose cells, taken without her knowledge in 1951, became one of the most important tools in medicine, vital for developing the polio vaccine, cloning, gene mapping, and more. Henrietta's cells have been bought and sold by the billions, yet she remains virtually unknown and her family can't afford health insurance. This phenomenal New York Times bestseller tells a riveting story of the collision between ethics, race, and medicine, of scientific discovery and faith healing, and of a daughter consumed with questions about the mother she never knew. So, I would say the book was overall a good book. We did this thing called World Cafe, where we were in groups of 4, different groups each time. Everyone played a role. There was the host, the ambassador of meeting, the family investigator, and the ethics and biomedical researcher. Basically, that was kind of our discussion. So instead of full class discussions, we did it in these little groups, which actually I think was a bit more challenging. So you really had to read the book, and kind of really know what it's talking about. And what I will admit about the book is that it's a very powerful story. There is some chapters that do drag on, and there were some chapters about the cells themselves that were not very interesting, but I found all the family dynamic stuff very, it was wild, some of the stuff that happened. But I found it very interesting as to how it kind of all came together, and how the family members, they overcame their struggles and still trying to stay true to their mom. And I think it was a really powerful message throughout the book. I do think there was definitely some parts that dragged, but overall it was a good book. I think it will probably go down as the most boring book probably that we've ever read in school, or one of the most boring books. But to me, I personally enjoyed it. It was enough to watch the movie, which is on HBO Max. But one thing I will say is that there's a very long exposition to this. They explain a lot about her family, and in the movie, which I'll talk about in a minute, they skip over a lot of that. So kind of for a good chunk of it, they're talking about a lot of her background on the family, but also a lot of background on John Hopkins Hospital, which makes sense. I mean, when you have a whole book, you can do a lot more. You can cover a lot more stuff. Of course, a good chunk of it is timeline, afterward acknowledgments. Afterward is part of the book, and then a lot of notes. So I guess some of it is not actually part of the book. But yeah. What I will say is that I didn't really love that we really only read this book for a month, so we had to read a lot at once. So I feel like if maybe we spread it out a bit, I would get to enjoy the book a little bit more. But that's kind of beside the point. Interesting that Deborah really didn't become a main character until halfway through the book. and I wasn't really clear who is the main character here. Is it Rebecca, like Skloot? Which, I mean, obviously, she is the person in charge and driving the story. But I really wasn't until halfway through that I realized that Deborah is the main character. She's the one with the least amount of memories with her mom, basically, and she wants answers, and she never got them. And I thought it was a very interesting transition and how Deborah became the protagonist. And I, for a good chunk of the book, I wasn't sure where this was going, and then I kind of liked when they stuck with that. And that friendship between Rebecca and Deborah developing was really cool. Seeing that throughout the book. And I liked how each chapter we got a little bit more information about something. They kept building and building. Again, there were some chapters that were boring, but that's just, I guess that's all to a book. I mean, there's going to be some boring chapters. And yeah, I thought Rebecca did a great job at covering her story, pretty much every aspect of it. There were not many plot holes left unresolved. I think there were lots to discuss, and we actually did debates after this, which was stuff about tissue ownership, DNA manipulation, handicapped, should they be institutionalized, like just different topics related to the book. And that was very interesting and a cool thing to kind of see us, because we as teenagers, we don't think about a lot of these things. So, it was actually kind of cool for us to branch out a little bit from what we usually read and focus on this. So I did appreciate that. So that's really all I have to say about the book. I mean, so the movie, this is a movie on HBO Max, and I'm going to pull this up because it is a bit different. Here, I'm just going to look up the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks movie. The little summary here says, in 1951, cancerous cells from Henrietta Lacks lead to breakthroughs that change the face of medicine forever. Aided by writer Rebecca Skloot, Deborah Lacks embarks on a quest to learn about the mother she never knew. So the movie starts off right away with some very interesting editing. They edit all these newspaper clippings together, and it was kind of like a cool sequence to see that, to kind of start off the movie and really give some background. And what I appreciate about the movie is that the background, like the exposition, was a lot shorter. They kind of gave you what you needed to know in maybe 5 minutes, and then they moved on with the plot of the movie. Where in the book, a good half of the book is exposition, which I get. When you're writing a book, you have more time. You can make it however long you want to, really. When you're doing a movie, you don't have as much time. So there's more restrictions. But the who stars in this? Oprah Winfrey is Deborah. Rose Byrne. Rose is Rebecca Skloot. And there's a few other people in here. Not many people I really recognize, but obviously Oprah Winfrey is Deborah. I thought it was interesting that they did not get Rebecca to actually play herself. Maybe she's not an actress. It would have been kind of interesting, though. I wonder how it felt for Rose to play the role of a real author. And how, she had to step into Rebecca's shoes to play this. I thought that would be a challenge for sure. And Oprah Winfrey, too, having to step into that. But the difference is that that's a character where, it's still a real person, but there is a difference because one's alive, and, Rebecca's alive, so it's obviously different than Deborah, who was dead at the time of this movie. But basically, Deborah was the main character in this movie, and it was evident from the beginning. And I thought Oprah Winfrey did a great job in her role. I thought she did a great job showing the emotion. I thought all of the Lacks did a great job, with Lawrence getting very angry and Sonny kind of, being the voice of reason. We did not get to see much of the dad, which was kind of a bummer. I wanted to see more of him and more of the stepmom, and they did address it, but I thought that was something very key the whole Ethel and Day thing from the book, that they kind of cut out a lot of it for the movie, and I thought that was kind of a bummer. But Zachariah is also in here, and they do bring back a lot of the characters. I think instead of Bobette, it's Barbara. They changed the name of Lawrence's wife. So there's a difference there. Again, they obviously don't cover a lot of the cell stuff in this. It's the movie focuses on the friendship between Deborah and Rebecca. That's the main thing, which was kind of what the second half of the book was like. There was a very similar scene when Rebecca finally snapped at Deborah, tired of her attitude and tired of her spiraling and all of that, which was very similar to what happened in the book, which I appreciated. I think there was a lot of differences between the book and the movie, but I think they covered Deborah the way I thought they would, and I thought Oprah played it perfectly. The showing Deborah spiraling and kind of like going back and forth, how she's still grieving her mother and she never fully actually got to grieve, and how that affects you and how that makes you spiral. And when Rebecca really like stepped up and said like, no, like this is your issue, you need to learn to trust me on this, then that really caused Deborah to like snap out of whatever she was thinking Rebecca was, and to start to get over her grief a little bit, and then that friendship was finally able to flourish. I thought their friendship was really sweet, and we actually got to see it in the movie, where we just read about it in the book, obviously. But I thought it was a really sweet ending, too, with Henrietta holding Deborah. And yeah, we didn't get to see much Henrietta in the movie. They showed some scenes with her, but not a whole lot. I would say this was Deborah's movie. Like Deborah was this movie. It was mostly all about her. Even Rebecca Skloot got less than I thought she would. I think if it was mostly about her, then people would think it's more of like a biography type of movie about the author than an actual something about the book. So I do like that they did that. One thing I noticed is that they spent a lot of time driving, and I was just thinking, oh, good, they used their turn signals. I don't know why, but just for some reason they were like driving 5 different times throughout the movie, if my friend Oliver was listening to this, he would think this is the worst movie ever because they're driving, not for most of it, but for a part of it. But yeah, basically, I would recommend this book. I mean, if you can get past the boring parts, I think you could really sympathize with Deborah and the Laxes, because what happened was messed up. I'm a firm believer that you need consent. You need to inform the family if you are going to do this procedure and take her cells and do stuff with them. Then she needs to know, Henrietta needs to know, and so does her family. And I think the hospital really did them wrong there. And you can have your own opinion on it, but that's just mine. I think that was the general consensus in our class. There was a debate about tissue ownership and whether when it leaves your body, is it still really yours? And I do think it's still yours. And I do think that people can do stuff with it if they get permission. And I think informed consent is one of the Jim Crow laws, and that is a huge thing in this book. And there was something called benevolent deception, which is keeping information from patients who are because they don't want to confuse them. And that is something that I think came back up in multiple discussions about how that's valid, but also it's a question of like keeping it from someone and keeping it from their family, it affects the person less if they die, but it affects the family even more. And they obviously weren't thinking about the family at all. And you got to sympathize with the family. I would have maybe liked to see a little bit more of the siblings together. But I understand why, they couldn't do a full sibling thing because of the story being of the friendship between Deborah and Rebecca. I totally understand that. But it was a really good book and a solid movie. I don't know. I would say if I had to choose one, I don't choose the movie often. And I want to say the movie. Um, but it's just so hard. I mean, I was going back and forth on this. I think I'm gonna choose the movie actually, mostly because it fit a lot into 90 minutes, and I felt more while I watched the movie than when I read the book, and that is very uncommon for me and for a lot of people. But to me, I felt that the movie did a great job. Oprah Winfrey did a great job as Deborah. I wish the movie got more praise, and maybe it did, and because this came back in 2017. So, but I would highly recommend, if you are reading this in English and you don't like it, I would recommend you giving it another try. And yeah. So, and then watch the movie if you're interested, or if you're watching it in school, that's great. Then you can witness some of these powerful moments. And there was honestly a really good scene in the rain. It's not a rain kiss if there's like teen drama lovers listening to this, but a really powerful scene in the rain too. So comment down below if you've read this book, or are you reading it, what you think of it. Have you watched the movie? What do you think of it? I would love to hear your feedback. So thanks everyone for watching the studio. Like, comment, subscribe, and bye everyone.